You are not here by accident. Finding this video now means your current vibration already contains the potential for a higher coherence in the 2026 timeline. Not as a future reward, not as something you must unlock through effort, but as a capacity that already exists within your field. If that capacity were not present, this message would simply pass through your awareness without registering. That is how resonance functions. You only notice what you are already capable of holding. Not everyone can perceive or receive this signal. This is not a statement of worth or hierarchy. It is a statement of state. Perception opens when identity has begun to loosen from older frequencies. When familiar emotional reactions no longer fully satisfy. When the stories that once felt solid start to feel thin. That loosening often feels subtle. It may show up as restlessness, quiet disinterest in old pursuits, or a sense that you are no longer aligned with the life you are maintaining. None of that is a problem. It is evidence of readiness. Timing, then, is not random. Timing is resonance. This video appears when your internal configuration can register it without distortion. There is no rush embedded in that timing. There is no pressure implied. Urgency belongs to misalignment, because urgency assumes something is missing or about to be lost. What is present here is different. What is present is the opportunity to crystallize what is already forming. Crystallization does not require force. It does not respond to strain or intensity. Crystallization occurs when a frequency is allowed to settle into coherence without interference. When you stop trying to manipulate the process and instead allow identity to reorganize around what is already true. The field does not respond to effort. It responds to congruence. When your emotional state, self-concept, and attention stop contradicting one another, coherence forms naturally. If you are here, something in you has already shifted. You may still carry old habits, old reactions, and familiar patterns, but they no longer feel absolute. They feel optional. That change alone alters which trajectories can stabilize. Reality does not shift because you demand it. It shifts because you are no longer the same reference point you once were. This is why recognition matters more than action. The moment something is clearly seen, it cannot be unseen. And what can no longer be unseen cannot continue to operate in the same way. Recognition reorganizes the field without effort. It is quiet. It is immediate. It does not announce itself. This video is not asking you to believe anything. It is asking you to notice what is already present in your experience. The sense that another way of being is available. The calm awareness that the future does not need to be forced. The understanding that alignment feels steady, not dramatic. These are not concepts. They are signals your system already recognizes. Stay with that recognition. Do not rush to define it or act on it. Allow it to settle. Crystallization happens when interference stops. This is the beginning of that settling. If you are aligned with this frequency, subscribe and remain within it. Identity is not who you think you are. It is not your personality, your history, or the roles you occupy. Identity is the internal structure through which reality becomes stable. It is the reference point the field uses to resolve experience. Whatever you consistently identify as becomes the anchor around which circumstances organize. This is the law. Reality does not respond to what you want. It responds to what you are being. More precisely, it responds to what you are willing to recognize as yourself. When identity is coherent, experience stabilizes. When identity is fragmented, reality reflects that fragmentation as inconsistency, repetition, and drift. Most people attempt to change their lives without touching identity. They try to think differently, act differently, or fix surface behaviors while remaining loyal to outdated self-definitions. The result is instability. Progress appears briefly, then collapses back into familiar patterns. Not because change was denied, but because identity could not hold it. Attachment is what fractures coherence. Attachment to stories about who you are. Attachment to emotional reactions that once kept you safe. Attachment to self-images built in environments that no longer exist. These attachments keep identity divided. One part reaches forward while another part clings backward. Reality reflects this split exactly. This is why effort feels exhausting. Effort is the sensation of identity pulling in two directions at once. When identity is aligned, action feels simple. Not easy, but clean. No internal argument. No resistance disguised as motivation. Refining identity is not self-improvement. Self-improvement implies lack, deficiency, or a future version that must be achieved. Refinement is different. Refinement is subtraction. It is the gradual release of definitions that no longer match your current state of awareness. You are not becoming more. You are becoming more precise. Precision matters. A distorted identity produces distorted outcomes. A clear identity produces clarity without force. This is why recognition precedes change. When you see that a self-definition no longer fits, you do not need to destroy it. You simply stop feeding it. Attention withdraws. Emotional charge dissolves. The structure loses relevance. You may notice this happening already. Certain reactions feel outdated. Certain ambitions feel hollow. Certain fears no longer grip the same way. This is not loss. This is recalibration. Identity is updating itself to match a broader field of awareness. Do not rush this process. Rushing is another identity trying to secure control. Allow the refinement to occur naturally. Observe what feels false without immediately replacing it. Gaps are not emptiness. Gaps are space for coherence to form. As identity becomes simpler, reality follows. Circumstances align without negotiation. Decisions clarify without strain. What once required constant effort becomes unnecessary. This is not because the world has changed, but because the reference point has. Identity determines what can be stabilized because identity is the stabilizer. You do not need to invent a new self. You need to stop insisting on versions that no longer resonate. When that insistence ends, alignment does not need to be pursued. It becomes the default. This is the work. Not building. Not fixing. Not improving. Recognizing what you no longer are, and letting reality reorganize around what remains. Emotion is not a reaction to reality. Emotion is the active signal that shapes how reality organizes around you. It is the primary tuning variable. Long before thought forms, long before action follows, emotional tone establishes coherence or distortion. This is not symbolic. This is mechanical. What you feel consistently is what the field responds to. Not what you say you want. Not what you believe intellectually. Emotion carries information about alignment. Expansion signals congruence. Contraction signals misalignment. These sensations are not problems to be corrected. They are guidance indicating whether identity and frequency are moving together or pulling apart. Most people misunderstand emotion because they were taught to manage it rather than listen to it. They suppress discomfort and exaggerate positivity, believing this will improve outcomes. In reality, suppression distorts the signal. When emotion is denied, it does not disappear. It fragments. And fragmented signals produce unstable results. Emotional honesty is not indulgence. It is precision. To feel what is present without dramatizing it or pushing it away is to allow the signal to remain clean. When emotion is acknowledged fully, it completes its cycle. When it is resisted, it loops. The loop becomes a pattern. The pattern becomes a life. This is why forced positivity never stabilizes alignment. It attempts to overwrite the signal instead of refine it. Calm awareness refines. Control distorts. When you allow emotion to be felt without assigning meaning or blame, coherence increases automatically. There is no effort involved. The system corrects itself when interference stops. Vulnerability is often misunderstood here. Emotional awareness is not exposure or collapse. It is containment. It is the ability to stay present with sensation without identifying with it. You are not your emotion. You are the awareness registering it. That distinction changes everything. Once awareness is stable, emotion becomes information rather than identity. Notice how certain emotional states feel expansive, even when they are quiet. Notice how others feel tight, even when they are loud. This is not about good or bad. It is about resonance. The body knows before the mind explains. When you trust that knowing, alignment becomes simpler. Avoid the temptation to analyze emotion endlessly. Analysis is another form of control. Feeling does not require explanation to be effective. It requires permission. The moment you stop negotiating with emotion, it stops demanding attention. It delivers its message and moves on. As emotional awareness becomes consistent, identity stabilizes. When identity stabilizes, experience follows. Reality does not need to be instructed. It mirrors the internal signal without commentary. This is why emotional precision is more powerful than affirmation, visualization, or strategy. Do not try to change how you feel in order to align. Feel what is present until alignment changes naturally. This is not passive. It is exact. Emotion is the dial. Awareness is the hand that rests on it without forcing it in either direction. This is how coherence forms. Not through control, but through honest presence. When emotion is allowed to be what it is, it refines itself. And as it refines, reality reorganizes without effort. Forcing is the most common form of interference, and it often disguises itself as discipline, motivation, or commitment. But control is not neutral. Control is a signal. It tells the field that identity does not trust its own alignment, so it attempts to override the process. The moment force enters, coherence destabilizes. Striving feels active, but it is reactive. It arises from the assumption that something is missing or not moving fast enough. That assumption creates friction. When you push toward an outcome, you anchor attention on absence rather than presence. The field mirrors that state precisely, not as punishment, but as feedback. Many people try to tune themselves into a different trajectory through effort. They monitor their thoughts, regulate their behavior, and correct their emotions, believing consistency will create stability. What actually happens is oscillation. One day alignment feels close. The next day it feels lost. This is not failure. It is interference created by over-effort. When intention is aligned but effort is excessive, the signal becomes distorted. It is like adjusting a dial constantly instead of allowing it to settle. The more you adjust, the less stable the frequency becomes. Stability does not come from intensity. It comes from stillness. Ease is not laziness. Ease is accuracy. When alignment is correct, action feels clean. There is no internal debate, no pressure to perform, no need to convince yourself. Clarity appears naturally. Decisions feel obvious, not dramatic. This is how you know tuning is accurate. Not by excitement, but by simplicity. Control often emerges when identity is afraid of losing momentum. It believes that if it stops pushing, everything will collapse. In reality, collapse happens because of pushing, not because of allowing. When effort relaxes, coherence increases. The system self-corrects without supervision. Notice how the body responds when you stop trying to manage the outcome. There is often a subtle release. Breathing deepens. Thoughts slow. Attention widens. This is not coincidence. This is the nervous system recognizing alignment. The field responds to that recognition immediately. Striving keeps attention locked on process. Ease shifts attention back to presence. Presence is where stabilization occurs. Not because presence is special, but because presence is free of interference. When you are present, identity is not projecting forward or pulling backward. It is available. This does not mean you stop acting. It means action emerges from clarity rather than compulsion. You move when movement is obvious. You pause when pausing is natural. There is no narrative about progress. There is only responsiveness. If you feel the impulse to force, do not fight it. Observe it. The desire to control is itself a signal that alignment is being questioned. Let that observation be enough. When control is seen clearly, it loosens on its own. Like the video now as a confirmation that this recognition has landed. Stability is not something you create. It is something you allow by removing what disrupts it. The less you interfere, the clearer the signal becomes. And when the signal is clear, reality aligns without instruction. Recognition is not a process. It is an event. And when it occurs, coherence changes instantly without effort. This is because recognition does not add anything to the system. It removes distortion. The moment something is seen clearly, the structure that depended on it being unseen loses stability. Most people believe change requires repetition, discipline, or time. Those things operate at the level of behavior. Recognition operates at the level of structure. When a misalignment is recognized, identity can no longer organize itself around the same assumption. The old configuration may still appear, but it cannot fully reassert authority. Something fundamental has shifted. This is why recognition feels quiet. There is no surge, no drama, no emotional peak. There is simply a settling. A sense that something has been resolved without needing to be solved. The nervous system relaxes because it no longer has to maintain a contradiction. Alignment locks not because you hold it, but because the alternative loses relevance. Effort tries to replace one pattern with another. Recognition dissolves the pattern entirely. This is the difference. When you try to change, the old structure remains active in the background, resisting replacement. When you recognize, the structure collapses on its own. There is nothing to fight. Nothing to maintain. Once something is clearly seen, it cannot be unseen. This is not motivation. It is irreversibility. You may revisit familiar behaviors, but they no longer feel convincing. They feel mechanical. They feel optional. That loss of conviction is the sign that coherence has shifted. Recognition does not come from analysis. Analysis circles the edge. Recognition lands. It often arrives when you stop trying to understand and simply observe. When you notice a pattern without explaining it. When you see a reaction without justifying it. That moment of seeing is enough. This is why alignment does not require constant attention. Once recognition has occurred, stability becomes the default. You do not need to remind yourself. You do not need to reinforce it. Reinforcement implies fragility. Recognition creates solidity. The field responds immediately to this shift. Not as reward, not as confirmation, but as reflection. When identity no longer emits a contradictory signal, experience reorganizes naturally. Things that required effort no longer do. Things that felt blocked lose tension. Not because circumstances changed, but because the reference point did. Be precise here. Recognition is not agreement. It is not acceptance. It is not forgiveness. It is seeing. Pure, unfiltered seeing. When you see clearly, alignment is automatic. There is nothing else required. If you notice moments in your life where you suddenly stopped trying to fix something and it resolved on its own, that was recognition. The moment you saw the pattern clearly enough to stop feeding it. That is the mechanism at work. Do not chase recognition. Chasing recreates effort. Simply allow awareness to remain honest. When something is ready to be seen, it will present itself. And when it is seen, it will not need your help to dissolve. Comment with the words, "I am ready," to anchor this recognition. Recognition stabilizes frequency because it removes distortion at the source. Once the source is clear, alignment holds without maintenance. This is the law. When coherence shifts, what no longer matches it becomes visible. This is not a setback. It is not a return to something old. It is exposure. Patterns surface because they can no longer hide inside unconscious alignment. Visibility is the first sign of disengagement, not of failure. Most people misinterpret this phase. They believe that if old habits, thoughts, or emotional reactions appear again, something has gone wrong. They assume progress should look like constant improvement and increasing comfort. That assumption is inaccurate. Alignment does not erase patterns instantly. It removes their invisibility. When you were identified with a pattern, you did not see it clearly. You lived inside it. It felt normal. As coherence increases, distance appears. The pattern stands out. You notice it. That noticing is not regression. It is separation. You cannot step away from something you cannot see. This is why instability often appears right after recognition. The system is reorganizing. Old structures are no longer being reinforced automatically, but they have not fully dissolved yet. They surface because they are losing support, not because they are gaining strength. The mind often labels this as going backwards, but that label comes from misunderstanding the process. Visibility is not activation. A thought appearing is not the same as a thought being believed. An emotion arising is not the same as an emotion being identified with. As alignment increases, you experience more without becoming more. Awareness widens while attachment loosens. Old patterns become visible because they are no longer protected by unconscious loyalty. Before, identity depended on them. Now, identity is no longer organized around them. They rise to the surface to be seen clearly, one last time, without defense. Do not rush to eliminate what appears. Elimination implies threat. Threat creates resistance. Resistance feeds the very thing you want gone. Instead, observe without commentary. Let the pattern show itself fully without interpretation. The moment it is seen without reaction, it begins to lose coherence. This is not a test. Nothing is checking whether you are aligned enough. There is no standard you are failing to meet. The field is simply responding to a clearer signal. As clarity increases, anything incongruent stands out more sharply. That is refinement, not punishment. Instability does not mean you are losing ground. It means the ground is shifting. Stable misalignment feels familiar. Transitional alignment feels uncertain. That uncertainty is not danger. It is openness. The system is no longer locked into repetition. You may notice that old reactions feel flatter now. Less convincing. They may still arise, but they do not carry the same authority. This is the sign to watch for. Not disappearance, but loss of grip. That loss is irreversible once noticed. Let visibility do its work. You do not need to process everything that appears. Processing is another form of engagement. Seeing is enough. What is clearly seen without judgment cannot maintain itself. As coherence continues to refine, patterns will surface, fade, and fall away without confrontation. The more neutral your awareness, the faster this occurs. Nothing is being taken from you. You are simply no longer carrying what does not match your state. This is how real change unfolds. Quietly. Gradually. Through clarity, not struggle. When old patterns become visible, alignment is already underway. Contrast is not a problem to be solved. It is a function of refinement. Without contrast, coherence cannot sharpen. Preference cannot clarify itself in a vacuum. It is through encountering what does not align that alignment becomes unmistakable. Most people resist contrast because they believe clarity should feel smooth from the beginning. They expect alignment to arrive as certainty, confidence, and ease. But clarity often emerges through confusion first. Confusion is not the opposite of alignment. Confusion is the state in which outdated reference points dissolve before new coherence stabilizes. When contrast appears, it exposes difference. Difference between what feels expansive and what feels constrictive. Difference between what drains energy and what sustains it. This does not require analysis. The body already registers it. Emotional tone shifts instantly in response to contrast, long before the mind explains why. This is why contrast sharpens coherence. It removes ambiguity. When you feel something clearly does not fit, preference becomes obvious. Not because you reasoned your way there, but because resonance made the distinction undeniable. Alignment becomes felt, not chosen. Confusion often precedes this clarity because the mind loses familiar anchors. Old definitions stop working, but new ones have not yet formed. The mind interprets this as disorder. In reality, it is recalibration. The system is releasing assumptions that no longer match your state, creating temporary uncertainty. That uncertainty is not obstruction. It is space. Contrast does not demand action. It demands honesty. When you encounter situations, thoughts, or emotional states that feel out of sync, notice them without immediately correcting course. The noticing itself refines coherence. Each clear recognition strengthens discernment without effort. Avoid the impulse to label contrast as a mistake. Labeling turns refinement into resistance. Resistance prolongs confusion. Neutral observation allows contrast to complete its function quickly. Once the distinction is felt clearly, the system naturally orients away from what does not align. No forcing is required. Contrast also prevents false alignment. Without contrast, identity may settle into comfortable but misaligned patterns that feel stable but lack coherence. Contrast disrupts that false stability. It ensures alignment is precise, not approximate. This is why refinement can feel uncomfortable at first. Precision often arrives through disruption. As coherence sharpens, contrast becomes subtler. Early on, distinctions may feel dramatic. Later, they become quiet. A subtle sense of "not this" is enough to redirect attention. This sensitivity is not weakness. It is refinement. Do not rush to resolve confusion. Let it do its work. Confusion clears when contrast has delivered its information. The moment preference becomes obvious, confusion dissolves on its own. No conclusion is needed. No decision is forced. Alignment emerges naturally. Contrast is not slowing you down. It is calibrating you. Each encounter with what does not fit makes what does fit unmistakable. This is how coherence sharpens. Not through certainty alone, but through discernment shaped by experience. When contrast appears, trust that refinement is occurring. You are not off path. You are clarifying it. Outdated identity structures do not persist because they are strong. They persist because they are fed. Attention sustains them. Emotional investment stabilizes them. When either is withdrawn, the structure weakens without resistance. This is not theory. It is observable. An identity structure is simply a repeated reference point. A way of interpreting experience that once served a function. It may have provided safety, consistency, or belonging. Over time, it became familiar. Familiarity turned into loyalty. Loyalty turned into unconscious maintenance. The structure continued, not because it was true, but because it was attended to. Resistance keeps identity structures alive. When you fight a pattern, you confirm its importance. When you try to eliminate it, you keep it in focus. Focus is fuel. This is why suppression fails. Suppression is still engagement. It is attention charged with fear or judgment. Neutrality dissolves what resistance reinforces. Neutrality does not mean indifference. It means non-investment. It means seeing without feeding. When awareness observes an identity pattern without commentary, without defense, without correction, the structure begins to lose coherence. There is no emotional charge to stabilize it. It cannot organize itself without fuel. Disengagement is not an action you perform. It is a consequence of awareness. The moment you clearly see that a pattern no longer represents you, effort becomes unnecessary. You do not need to push it away. You simply stop participating in it. Participation ends naturally when belief ends. This is why awareness is so disruptive to outdated identities. Awareness introduces distance. Distance breaks identification. Once identification loosens, the structure can no longer claim authority. It may still appear, but it no longer defines behavior or perception. It becomes background noise. Notice how certain self-definitions already feel less convincing. Roles you once defended no longer feel worth protecting. Reactions that once felt automatic now feel optional. This is disengagement in progress. It does not announce itself. It happens quietly, through loss of interest rather than conflict. Avoid dramatizing this process. Drama re-engages the structure. You do not need to declare that an identity is over. Declarations create another attachment. Silence is more effective. Non-response is more precise. What is not fed dissolves. Attention is powerful. Wherever it rests, coherence forms. When attention is withdrawn from outdated structures and allowed to rest in present awareness, identity simplifies. Simpler identity produces clearer experience. Clearer experience reinforces simplicity. This feedback loop stabilizes alignment naturally. You may notice moments where you start to engage an old pattern and then stop mid-motion. Not because you forced yourself to stop, but because it no longer made sense. That pause is awareness interrupting habit. That interruption is disengagement. Nothing is being taken from you in this process. You are not losing parts of yourself. You are releasing references that no longer match your state. What remains is not emptiness. It is coherence. As awareness continues to clarify, outdated identity structures fall away without confrontation. Neutrality does the work. Attention moves elsewhere. Emotional charge dissipates. The structure collapses quietly. This is not detachment through withdrawal. It is freedom through clarity. When you stop feeding what no longer resonates, alignment no longer has competition. Reality reorganizes around what remains, effortlessly. Stabilization does not occur when something feels extraordinary. It occurs when it feels internally normal. This is one of the most misunderstood aspects of alignment. People assume that a higher trajectory should feel intense, dramatic, or euphoric. But intensity does not stabilize. Familiarity does. The nervous system is the gatekeeper here. It does not respond to ideas about what should be possible. It responds to what feels safe enough to sustain. If a frequency feels too foreign, too elevated, or too removed from your current sense of self, the system resists it automatically. Not because it is wrong, but because it cannot yet be held without strain. This is why many people experience brief glimpses of alignment that do not last. The frequency is touched, but not normalized. It feels exciting, expansive, even revelatory, but it does not feel like home. When the nervous system does not recognize a state as familiar, it cannot stabilize it. The system defaults back to what it knows, even if what it knows is uncomfortable. Internal normalization is what allows a frequency to remain. Normalization does not mean settling for less. It means allowing a state of coherence to feel ordinary rather than exceptional. When alignment becomes ordinary, it becomes sustainable. When it remains special, it remains temporary. Notice how experiences that last in your life tend to feel unremarkable once they stabilize. Relationships that endure feel calm rather than dramatic. States of clarity that remain feel grounded rather than euphoric. This is not a loss of depth. It is depth becoming integrated. Safety is the signal the nervous system uses to confirm coherence. Safety does not mean the absence of challenge. It means the absence of threat. When a frequency does not threaten identity, belonging, or survival, the system allows it to settle. When it does, even subtly, the system tightens and pulls away. This is why forcing expansion backfires. Forcing tells the nervous system that something is being imposed. Imposition triggers defense. Defense blocks stabilization. Allowing, on the other hand, communicates trust. Trust signals safety. Safety allows coherence to deepen. Subtle normalcy is the signature to watch for. When alignment is correct, it does not demand attention. It does not announce itself. It feels steady, grounded, and quietly right. There is no urgency to prove it or act on it. There is simply a sense of fit. If you find yourself chasing a feeling, that feeling is not ready to stabilize. Chasing indicates that it still feels external to you. What stabilizes is what you can rest inside without effort. What feels like an extension of who you already are. Give the nervous system time to acclimate. Acclimation is not delay. It is integration. Each moment of calm familiarity strengthens the signal. Each moment of ease confirms safety. Over time, what once felt distant becomes natural. This is how higher coherence becomes lived reality. Not through intensity, but through normalization. When alignment feels normal, it no longer fluctuates. It stays. Stabilization does not occur in anticipation. It does not occur in memory. It occurs only in presence. The present moment is not a spiritual concept. It is the only location where coherence can actually form. Anywhere else, identity is referencing something that does not exist yet or no longer exists, and coherence cannot settle there. When attention moves into the future, it becomes speculative. It starts managing outcomes, rehearsing scenarios, measuring progress. This seems productive, but it introduces instability. Fixation on outcomes pulls identity out of alignment with what is currently being embodied. The signal becomes divided. One part is here. Another part is elsewhere. Division disrupts stabilization. The same happens when attention collapses into the past. Memory reinforces identity structures that may no longer be relevant. The nervous system replays old signals because attention keeps returning to them. This is not reflection. It is reactivation. Coherence cannot update when the reference point remains outdated. Presence removes this split. In presence, identity is not projecting or replaying. It is available. Availability is what allows a state to settle. When you are fully here, there is no contradiction between where attention is and what is being lived. That congruence is what allows alignment to hold. This is why fixation feels tense. Tension is the body registering divided attention. The system is trying to stabilize while being pulled out of the moment. When fixation relaxes, tension releases. The release is not emotional relief alone. It is structural alignment. Presence does not require effort. Effort implies moving towards something. Presence is stopping movement long enough for coherence to form. When you stop reaching, you stop interfering. When interference stops, alignment organizes itself naturally. Notice how moments of clarity tend to appear unexpectedly. Not when you are trying to solve something, but when you are simply present. Walking, resting, observing. These moments are not random. They arise when attention is no longer split. In that state, coherence can resolve without obstruction. Outcome fixation also introduces impatience. Impatience signals distrust. Distrust destabilizes. When you trust the present moment enough to remain with it, the system relaxes. Relaxation is not disengagement. It is alignment without force. Embodiment happens now or not at all. You cannot embody a future state. You can only embody the current configuration of identity and emotion. When that configuration is coherent, reality reflects it immediately. Reflection may not look dramatic, but it will be consistent. Presence is not passive observation. It is active alignment. It is the willingness to let now be sufficient. Sufficiency removes strain. Strain is the last barrier to stabilization. If you find yourself checking whether something is working, return to the moment you are in. Not to correct it. To inhabit it. The moment you inhabit where you are, coherence increases. And when coherence increases, alignment does not need to be chased. This is why presence is not a practice. It is a condition. A condition that allows what is already forming to take shape without resistance. When attention rests fully here, stabilization happens naturally. Not later. Now. Calm certainty is not an emotion you generate. It is a state that emerges when coherence is uninterrupted. When identity, emotion, and attention are aligned, there is no need for urgency. Nothing needs to be proven. Nothing needs to be accelerated. Calm certainty is the absence of internal argument. Impatience is the clearest signal of misalignment. It arises when part of you believes something should already be different. That belief creates oscillation. One moment you feel aligned, the next moment you doubt it. Oscillation is not caused by external delays. It is caused by internal division. Calm certainty eliminates that division by removing the demand for immediate confirmation. Certainty does not shout. It does not insist. It does not look for reassurance. When you are certain, you do not check repeatedly to see if something is working. You move, or you wait, without tension. That lack of tension is not complacency. It is accuracy. The system is no longer contradicting itself. Many people mistake excitement for alignment. Excitement spikes and crashes. It requires stimulation to sustain itself. Calm certainty does not fluctuate. It does not need novelty. It feels steady, grounded, and unremarkable. That is why it stabilizes. What is dramatic cannot hold. What is steady can. Impatience destabilizes because it pulls attention out of the present. It demands results as proof of alignment. That demand signals distrust. Distrust fractures coherence. The field mirrors that fracture as inconsistency. Calm certainty, on the other hand, signals trust. Trust allows coherence to settle without supervision. Steadiness is the natural expression of alignment. When alignment is real, it does not need reinforcement. You do not need to remind yourself. You do not need to correct yourself. You simply continue. This continuity is what allows experience to organize consistently around you. Notice how certainty feels in the body. It is relaxed. Breath is even. Muscles are not braced. There is no forward lean. The body is not preparing to chase or defend. This physical state is not separate from alignment. It is evidence of it. The nervous system recognizes coherence and relaxes into it. When impatience arises, do not judge it. Judgment adds another layer of interference. Simply notice that impatience is present and return to steadiness. Not by forcing calm, but by withdrawing the demand for outcome. The moment demand drops, certainty returns. Certainty does not require guarantees. It does not need timelines. It does not ask how or when. Those questions belong to control. Calm certainty belongs to coherence. It rests in the knowing that alignment does not need to be managed. As steadiness becomes familiar, oscillation fades. You stop swinging between hope and doubt. You stop scanning for signs. You stop interpreting every shift as success or failure. Experience becomes simpler. Simplicity is not reduction. It is alignment without noise. This is how alignment maintains itself. Not through vigilance, but through calm certainty. When certainty is present, the signal remains stable. When the signal remains stable, reality responds consistently. No force. No rush. Just coherence holding its own. You are not inside the process you have been trying to manage. You are the awareness within which the process unfolds. This distinction changes everything. The moment you recognize yourself as awareness rather than as the one struggling to align, struggle loses its function. Awareness does not force coherence. It allows it. Experience organizes itself around awareness naturally, the same way movement organizes around stillness. When you identify as the one doing, fixing, or controlling, alignment feels like work. When you recognize yourself as the awareness observing, alignment becomes automatic. Circumstances do not define you. They appear within you. Thoughts do not direct you. They arise within you. Emotional states do not trap you. They move through you. None of these phenomena are the stabilizing intelligence. Awareness is. Awareness is what remains consistent while everything else shifts. This is why effort has always felt heavy. Effort assumes you are a separate entity trying to influence reality from the outside. That assumption creates resistance. Resistance creates friction. Friction creates fatigue. When you stop identifying as the controller, resistance dissolves. The system no longer fights itself. Awareness does not need to intervene. It does not need to correct or adjust. Its clarity is enough. When awareness is present, incoherent patterns cannot sustain themselves. They rely on unconscious identification. The moment identification loosens, the pattern loses its anchor. Notice how problems feel different when you observe them instead of inhabiting them. They lose urgency. They lose weight. They become information rather than threats. This shift is not detachment. It is precision. You are no longer confusing what appears with what you are. The stabilizing intelligence of experience is not personal. It does not belong to the mind or the body. It is the field of awareness itself. When you rest as that field, coherence organizes without instruction. Decisions arise without deliberation. Action happens without strain. Pauses occur without guilt. This is why alignment cannot be achieved through effort. Effort reinforces the identity that alignment dissolves. Recognition removes the need to try. When you see that you are the space in which alignment forms, there is nothing to manage. Struggle ends when misidentification ends. Not because life becomes simple, but because resistance is no longer required. Experience can be intense without being difficult. Change can occur without effort. Stability can exist without control. You do not need to watch yourself constantly. Monitoring implies distrust. Awareness does not monitor. It observes. Observation is relaxed. It does not lean forward. It does not brace. It allows. As you rest in awareness, you may notice that alignment feels less like something you do and more like something that happens. That is because it was always happening. You were just standing in the way. Nothing needs to be added. Nothing needs to be removed. Simply notice what remains when you stop trying to be the one in charge. What remains is awareness. And awareness is already coherent. This recognition removes struggle at the root. When you are no longer trying to align, alignment has space to form. When you are no longer trying to control, coherence stabilizes on its own. This is not a practice. It is a realization. Non-interference is not stepping away from alignment. It is what allows alignment to settle. Most instability does not come from being off course. It comes from checking the course too often. Over-monitoring fragments coherence by constantly pulling attention out of the state that is forming. When you repeatedly ask whether something is working, you introduce doubt. Doubt is not neutral. Doubt signals that identity does not yet trust its own alignment. That signal creates fluctuation. One moment you feel steady, the next moment you feel uncertain. The oscillation is not caused by reality. It is caused by interference. Over-monitoring often feels responsible. It appears as self-awareness, reflection, or vigilance. But vigilance assumes danger. Danger implies misalignment. The system responds to that implication immediately. Attention tightens. The nervous system braces. Coherence loosens. Trust is not belief in an outcome. Trust is allowing the process to unfold without supervision. When trust is present, attention remains relaxed. Relaxation allows frequency to settle naturally. This is not passive. It is precise. Precision knows when to act and when not to interfere. Non-interference does not mean disengagement from life. It means disengagement from micromanagement. You still respond to what is present. You still take action when action is clear. What you stop doing is constantly checking whether you are aligned enough, doing enough, or progressing fast enough. Those checks introduce noise. Think of alignment like sediment settling in water. If the water is constantly disturbed, clarity cannot form. The disturbance does not have to be dramatic. Even small movements prevent settling. When movement stops, clarity appears on its own. The same principle applies here. Trust allows you to stop touching the process. When you stop touching it, coherence organizes itself. This is not a leap of faith. It is observation-based. Notice how moments of ease arrive when you stop evaluating. Notice how clarity returns when you stop asking for confirmation. Non-interference requires restraint. Not restraint from action, but restraint from unnecessary adjustment. The impulse to adjust often comes from discomfort with uncertainty. But uncertainty is not misalignment. It is the space in which alignment consolidates. Precision means knowing when not to act. A skilled hand does not constantly correct. It allows the system to complete its movement. Interference interrupts that completion. When you interfere less, alignment has room to stabilize. You may notice that when you stop checking, something in the body relaxes. That relaxation is not disengagement. It is the nervous system recognizing safety. Safety allows coherence to deepen. Deepening does not require effort. It requires permission. If doubt arises, let it arise without responding to it. Responding feeds it. Observing it allows it to pass. The same applies to impatience, excitement, or fear. None of these need management. Management is interference. Awareness is sufficient. Non-interference is not giving up control. It is recognizing that control was never stabilizing alignment in the first place. Stability comes from coherence, not supervision. As trust increases, monitoring naturally decreases. You stop asking whether you are aligned because alignment no longer feels fragile. It feels settled. That settled feeling is not dramatic. It is quiet. It is ordinary. It is stable. This is how coherence holds. Not through constant correction, but through non-interference. When you stop interrupting what is already aligning, it finishes organizing itself. The capacity to stabilize a higher coherence trajectory is not something you need to develop. It is something you are already demonstrating by being here, by following this transmission without resistance, without urgency, without the need to be convinced. Capacity reveals itself through presence. And presence is already active. Everything that has been explored leads to this simple confirmation. Identity no longer clings to outdated definitions. Emotion is no longer suppressed or dramatized, but registered as information. Recognition has occurred, quietly dissolving structures that once required effort to maintain. Embodiment has replaced projection. Awareness has taken precedence over control. These are not future achievements. They are current conditions. You do not need to check whether you are aligned enough. That question arises only when alignment feels fragile. What is fragile requires maintenance. What is coherent sustains itself. The steadiness you may feel now, even if subtle, is evidence of that sustainability. It does not need to be intense. Intensity fades. Coherence remains. A high coherence 2026 trajectory does not demand constant focus or preparation. It responds to identity that is no longer divided. When attention, emotion, and self-concept stop contradicting one another, reality organizes accordingly. This organization is not dramatic. It is consistent. Consistency is the marker of real alignment. You are not selecting a future through force. You are allowing a trajectory to resolve through who you are now. That resolution does not depend on time. It depends on stability of state. And stability is already present when awareness rests without interference. Nothing about this process requires vigilance. Vigilance implies threat. Threat implies misalignment. You are past that stage. What remains is trust, not belief, but embodied trust. The kind that does not need reassurance. The kind that does not scan for signs. The kind that knows without narrating. The mind may still attempt to reassert control. That is habit, not authority. Let it pass. The system no longer needs management. Alignment is no longer fragile enough to be lost through thought alone. What has shifted structurally does not revert through momentary noise. This is the quiet certainty that matters. Not excitement. Not anticipation. Just the calm recognition that nothing essential is missing. From this state, action arises cleanly when required. Rest happens without guilt. Movement and stillness both feel appropriate. This is coherence living itself. You do not need to wait for proof. Proof follows stability, not the other way around. When identity holds steady, experience reflects it naturally. No announcement. No milestone. Just alignment expressing itself over time. If this video found you, it did so because the conditions were already present. Not because something was about to be taken away, but because something was ready to be lived. That readiness is not fragile. It does not expire. It deepens as long as interference remains absent. Remain where you are. Not physically, but internally. Let awareness continue doing what it already knows how to do. Nothing needs to be added. Nothing needs to be forced. If you are aligned with this frequency, subscribe and share this with someone who needs to hear it.